Okay, welcome back to episode 6, lucky number 6 of the Ask Vince show. Save this one for this episode because it is just rapid fire. So, got a bunch of questions, probably about 8 questions from Musharraf, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, but questions came in through LinkedIn, so I wanted to save this one and do it rapid fire and try to answer all of her questions at the same time. So I'm going to be looking at another screen while I read the questions, but I'm going to hopefully come back to home to answer the questions. So first question, how would you eliminate unnecessary steps and people in the process when someone is just using their position to be a control freak? Fantastic question, and something that you are likely going to encounter just in work in general. I do this spiel as part of a presentation that I do called the 6 stakeholders that you meet in Project Hell. And the premise of it is it's meant to be fun and to show, to have some fun with the different stakeholders that you meet that cause you trouble and grief in a project. But at the core, the premise is that people are self-interested, and they are always going to act in a way that benefits them, even at the expense of the project or the organization or whatever. So if they stand to lose, they're not going to be helpful. And so how do you eliminate those people? They're not very easily. You've got to either figure out what's in it for them, make them see the better way. Sometimes you got to pull rank and get someone above them to drop a hammer on them, figuratively, so that they get in line. But that is not, I'm looking at a sticky now for a project that I'm working on. Like that level of insecurity is what leads to politics in the workplace and in a project process environment. So if we could just get that politics out of the way and deal with that insecurity of that individual, because that's what leads to someone being a control freak. So how do you deal with them? Very carefully, Musharraf. All right, next question. Where does communication come into play? I guess you're talking in a project context or in a process context. Constantly. So you've got to constantly be communicating from project manager or project lead or green belt, black belt, whatever, to project team, up to sponsor, to process owner. You've constantly got to be communicating with your team and with all the players, all the stakeholders involved. Communication can kill your project, process, your improvement, your whatever. Failure to communicate is gonna sink you more than a failed project will. All right. What are the best tools and practices to enforce communication and keep the rest of the team informed continuously? So I don't have any recommendations of tools, but practices is really about the frequency of meeting. And so if you want to keep the team informed continuously, you should communicate continuously. And whether that's a daily stand-up or bi-weekly stand-up or email communication at the end of the day where everybody updates the rest of the team. I mean, it becomes very complex as you have larger teams to get an email from everybody telling them what you did that day, because I don't really care what you do every day. So it's really, you have to decide what's best for the situation and try to pick the practice that's going to get you the right level of communication. And I say that because it is actually possible to over communicate. Like I've worked on projects in my career where you had twice daily stand-ups, and it was like I have nothing new to report from the after. Like I've got a number of different things that I was working on at the time. I have nothing new to share from the morning to the afternoon, and so that I thought was a bit of an a situation where there was over communication. But you've got to figure out, based on the team, the number of players involved, and really how often communication is required. If you trust, and it comes back to that trust and insecurity. If everyone's secure and trusts each other, then the need for communication isn't as prevalent because everybody has their role and they know what they need to do. So hopefully that answered that question. Next, I said this was rapid fire. How do you avoid every single person building a new way of doing things in an attempt to bring change and improve things? So this is another sort of sticky one, and everyone thinks that their way is the best way, or that they can improve things. And this sort of comes back to a question that we got in the last episode from Gene. Sort of feels like it's a similar question. So how do you stop people? You've got to put controls in place, and those controls are going to ensure that the right people get to make decisions on changes to process, changes to a team, to whatever, and that not anybody can make that change. The reality is, when you get into any sort of working environment, people are smart. Someone's going to figure out a workaround or a better way to do something, and so that I think that's not something that you want to avoid, but I think it's something that you want to certainly control. So if someone has figured out a better way, quote, better way, then let's see if it actually is better, and then we're going to take that and standardize it out. So it's about standardizing the approach to work and getting everyone following the same steps, because you don't want to have too much variation or variability in the way that you're delivering a product or a service, especially to an external customer. All right. How do you foster openness and collaboration? Again, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, trust. You've got to trust the people that you work with. You've got to know that they have your back. They've got to know that you have their back. And if you've got trust, you're going to have that inherent openness, that inherent collaboration. I mean, I've been part of teams where the approach to building that camaraderie was, let's go out and have a beer after work, or beverage after work, or let's go for lunch once a month. And it's like it comes back to almost like a forced fun. Like it's not something you want to do, and that's not going to make you necessarily closer with your teammates. I certainly buy into the premise behind it, but the reality is that in and of itself isn't going to increase collaboration. So I think you've got to ultimately trust your team and trust the people that are involved. All right, last question. Aren't most process challenges as a result of ineffective communication and a lack of interest in teamwork? I'm starting to feel like a broken record here. Yes, I find that most process breakdowns from a project standpoint are the result of team members withholding information, team members not sharing, not collaborating, not being open, not being honest. And so the key here, if it hasn't been made abundantly clear, the key here is that collaboration, communication, they're important to get things done. And that applies in my world when it comes to process improvement projects. That applies in a larger project management context, PMO, business analysis context. That just applies in business, period. Like, you've got to trust the people that you're working with, that they're not there to stab you in the back. And believe me, I've been on that side where you don't feel like you can do what you need to do because there's someone there lurking, ready to just stick a knife in your back and twist. It's a terrible feeling, and it makes you want to withhold information. But I try not to be that guy, and I try to move past that, and I'm certainly more guarded than I would normally be. But I'm also not withholding information, because ultimately my role as a master black belt is to enable other people to be successful. You ask any of the folks that have gone through my program. I don't want any of the credit at the end. I want them to get the benefits. I want them to feel the success. And I get thanked, and that's great, but it's them that does the work, and I don't feel threatened by making those people more successful. It comes back to the Gary Vee concept of the honey empire. I'm not interested in building up my building. I want to build everybody's buildings, because if we can get the rising tide, all boats get lifted. It's not. I'm not just in it for me. So somehow this has turned into a little bio thing on me. Wasn't the point, Musharraf. I'm sorry. I hope I've answered your questions. If I didn't, please let me know, and we'll discuss it further. But thanks for your questions on episode 6 of the Ask Vince show. So thanks, and keep those questions coming. You can get me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, at Vince Mirabelli, Vince_Mirabelli, and on LinkedIn, Vincent Mirabelli. I think I still have a bunch of letters at the end of my name, so hit me up. I'll be posting this video, and thanks a lot.